Green.
Oh, there you go. Hello, yes. Thank you once again for being here. I so appreciate that you take the time and the logistics involved to be here. I know they're not easy, so thank you for being here. I see some familiar faces, and those that have not been here will soon be familiar faces, okay? Yes, like Didi said, I work for the CIA, and I'll get into that complicated story of the President of the United States getting personal with me. But before that, I want to say I'm running a cough you probably can hear. It's probably the freezing temperatures in Ajijic that have nothing to do with Puerto Vallarta. It's probably the generosity and the kindness that you have shown me that probably plays a role too. And I will add that today, because we have this topic, I decided to wear black. I've been keeping this shirt the whole week for today. Anyway, we will indeed go into the Trump administration as it relates to Mexico. So I'll do a couple of things differently today. I usually start these conversations by asking your opinion on things. What's in your mind? What's your first impression on the topic? I will refrain from that today because that entails opening a huge can of worms we will never be able to close. So what I'm saying is I'd rather give you a little bit of information, some background on our Mexican perspective on this thing that's happening in the United States. And then, of course, I am really interested in learning and hearing what you think, what your opinion is, and we will get there, but with a little bit more background on the Mexican case. There are cases that deal with the Trump administration all over the world, but I want you to focus on this country that's pretty much yours as well. Okay, and another thing I will say before we open all those several dozen cans of worms we're going to open today.
Carlos, one interruption. Would everybody please silence their phone? Thank you.
Another thing that I'll do different today is, remember, if you've been here or you've been listening to us on Zoom, hello to everyone out there in Zoom. I have always emphasized on these sessions the importance of conversation. I've sent you out to talk to Mexicans. I will keep repeating that. But in this case, I think it's really important that we realize that these conversations need to happen for things to get better. I'm really sad when I hear American friends in Puerto Vallarta tell me that they have stopped speaking to their mothers because the issue of Trump comes up. I've heard of Thanksgiving dinners that you also love with divided tables and a lot of conflict. And you know, while this is happening, I want you to know that something similar, just not as acute, I think, but very similar is happening in Mexico as well. These type of leaders that we have now, because as we mentioned Tuesday, former President López Obrador is very much on the game, and he is moving pieces as we speak, even though we have a new president. So the type of leader that AMLO is and the type of leader that President Trump are, both leaders, tend to get their ways by dividing people. And we see that happening. I mentioned, maybe I did mention, a book from a couple of New York Times columnists who wrote a book that's called The Divider. That was back on Trump 1. And he says that, they both say that one of the great tools they use to win elections, to change the regime that we're on, is to divide people. I'm not sure if you, it all depends on the number of Mexican friends you have and how much you talk to them, but if you can sense this, we talked about that a little bit. You shared your experience of talking to Mexicans about President Sheinbaum on Tuesday, and it came out that some people really loved her and some people really can't stand her. There is a division in this country as well that we're dealing with as we speak, and I see that in the US like 10 times more, right? I can see that feeling. So what I'm trying to say is I think it's our responsibility to go out to the other side and talk to mother and mother-in-law and sister and even daughters and sons, because if these conversations don't happen, I don't think nothing's going to change. I probably should be saying this at the end of the session, but I want to say it now because then we're on out of time and you guys mess up my program. So I want to say this because what we think out in the world, we foreigners, we Mexicans, Germans, French, Canadians especially, everyone out there, I think we all understand that if there is someone who can fix this problem, who can fix what's happening in the United States right now, it is you. This is a task for Americans, not for anyone else. We trust that you will go back to where the U.S. is supposed to be. But we can help you and we can support you. But if change is going to come in the U.S., I think it has to come to you. You probably remember Ronald Reagan. He is not liked by everyone. I liked him very much, but not so much on his policies, but his personalities and the way he spoke. When I was in college, remember, I studied communication, so we had a task, I remember very well. We had to choose the two most able political communicators, or communicators as leaders of the late part of the 20th century. And we had to choose two people who could really communicate with the people. The two people we as college students chose were Ronald Reagan and John Paul II. And Ronald Reagan would get up on the Oval Office and say, every big problem in America is solved at the kitchen table. Remember that? I don't think that's the message now. I don't think your current leaders want you to talk about things at the kitchen table, Thanksgiving or otherwise. So my invitation, as always, is go out and talk to Mexicans. They're still there. They haven't gone anywhere. And talk to your American family and friends and all that. I dared to say yesterday when we talked about the media, I dared to invite you to watch a little bit of Fox News. And if you like Fox News a lot, maybe a little bit of CNN, or maybe the Wall Street Journal, or maybe something else so you can understand what's happening on the other side. Instead of blocking yourself, let's have a conversation. Remember, the first thing I told you on Monday when I got here was the level of conversation that we engage in will determine the level of civilization that we have. In this small group, in the community, in the city, in the state, in the world, we need to bring the conversation up, and I do know this is a hard job, but I'm always giving you difficult homework, so that's the whole point of this session. Okay, we'll start with our topic, but I did want to let that out because I really think it's important, and do know that you have a duty and a responsibility to make things different in the U.S., and I have no doubt you can do it, as you've done so many times before. You know, this is not new, but this is going a little bit too long, much too long and much too harder than anyone else in the world imagined that it would be. So I'm sure that happened. So now let's go back to the U.S. and Mexico. Usually this session that I have is usually called the Mexico-United States relationship. That's how I titled it. But today I think it's important that we focus on this administration particularly. I don't want for us to lose too much time on how things have been. We could have, but I just want to start with this administration because things are really moving, and I think you need to understand how we view that, how we Mexicans view that, okay? So it's also fair I kind of tell you what I'm hoping. Okay, so just kind of give you a rundown of what I'm hoping to accomplish with you here on this second Trump administration and Mexico. We will try to look at how Trump often gets very personal with us. That's an ability of his. It happens with Mexicans as well, and this is pretty much what I just said. Getting personal with you also means dividing you, pushing you out of the other people around you. That is a skill he now has mastered. Trump's troubles with Mexico are of old. We're actually going to start really with that. I want you to know that Trump has not liked us for a very long time. This does not have to do only with 2016 and the election, but he has disliked Mexicans for a very long time, and I'll give you a couple of examples of that. What are Mexicans thinking about the second Trump administration? Well, that's a good one. I will ask you then what you've heard from Mexicans, and I will give you some of the opinion leaders' writings and columns. Here in Mexico, I'm not sure I mentioned that yesterday, but here in Mexico we have something we called the red circle, el círculo rojo. Ever heard that? The red circle is this group of intellectuals and columnists, like in the US, the New York Times, David Brooks, and all these people who are like, they call them elitists. I just think they're really well trained and they know how they're talking about, so we call them the red circle. So I will tell you a little bit of what the Mexican red circle is talking about. Are they always right? No. Do we always agree with them? No. But I think it's really interesting to read and go in depth into what they have to tell us, especially about this topic. And then, as we did with Claudia Sheinbaum, we'll try to go into the issues, the Trump decisions that are now affecting Mexico, the policy decisions. That is going on as we speak. A big thing happened this week with prisoners we sent, but the game is always moving, as with everything else that has to do with Trump, right? But I'd like to see at some of the issues, the drug trafficking organizations, crime, violence, the politics, the governors that the U.S. now thinks are very corrupt. They're probably right. Even infrastructure and energy and all that. I'll give you a voice, and you can bring up whatever. If I don't know about it, I'll let you know. But look, I'll just try to give you a little bit of the context. Okay? Is that clear? Let's start now with a video, so you get a break from me. Let's start not with a video, but with a cartoon. Like I was saying yesterday that Mexican newspapers are very good. The cartoon is titled it in English, "In the Pocket," and what we're saying there is Trump is saying the agreements with Mexico are going very well. That's what he's saying there. And he's talking to a U.S. audience, of course, right? So I'd like to use this picture just to tell you about how personal things can get. I have to admit that, political analysis and media analysis, something I've been doing for years. But when 2015 came up and Mr. Trump walked down that escalator and did all that show, I wasn't even considering him as a nominee. I never thought the Democrats, the Republicans would even get this close, not to electing him president, but to nominate him. So I have to admit, we were all wrong. We did not know this was going to happen. And what many Mexican analysts, and I think those around the world also believe, is you might remember that Washington Correspondents' Dinner, that one where they have jokes and fun and all that. You probably remember President Obama you do know that, yeah? So when I talk about the US, you know everything, but when I ask about Mexico, you know nothing. I'm just joking. We'll get to the Mexico part soon. So we all think that this Obama part really played a role in Donald Trump's decision to run. Our perception now is that that was the very moment that Donald Trump said, I am going to seek this presidency, whatever happens. I'm not sure that Obama is so conscious of this, but I do think, I like Obama very much, but I think he could have been a little kinder and not as straight, sharp, and mean to him, if you will, that night. Of course, no one was expecting that. The words Obama spoke that night were pretty much my political analysis of nothing's going to happen. He will never be president, so I can say whatever about him. So maybe President Obama now is like, I might have done things differently. I'm not sure that would have made any change, but we Mexicans and everyone else out in the world believe that that had a lot to do with this decision. Give me 5 minutes and I'll give you the word. Is that all right? Yes. Because I do want to say that when I say that President Trump gets personal, he's moving so many of the pieces on the board and he's doing so much to everyone in the US and outside that it does get personal. Yesterday I was talking about the Voice of America and NPR and all that as media, and I said it yesterday, the loss of the Voice of America is a personal loss for me because they are the reason I studied communication, the Voice of America, and I toured them and all that, so I'm really sad that the US is no longer doing or financing the Voice of America. In my case, what happened is it's a long story, but the US, when I left the office of the President of Mexico, my organization in the U.S. government knew about that, of course. They knew I had walked out, and I resigned from the office of the President because I wanted to move to Puerto Vallarta, which was happening. So the U.S. government came back to me and said, we'll give your job back, but this is a Mexico City embassy job. And I said, I would also be a bit of a negotiator with them, and I said, I'll do the job, just let me do it in Puerto Vallarta. That was 2016, actually, the year he was elected. So I can do that. So anyway, I became a contractor, no longer an employee, but a contractor with the U.S. government in Puerto Vallarta. Of course, the Trump administration came later that year, and the Trump administration decided that the work that we were doing was supposed to be done by Americans, that he did not want any foreigner doing this intelligence work that dealt with Mexico and Panama and Colombia and all these Latin American countries. So this is, it gets personal to me because my contract ended in 2023 because of his America First policy. So that entailed, I think I might have mentioned this Sunday or Monday. So the person who's doing my job now is an American who is fluent in Spanish, but lives in LA. And I don't think, this is not to say I'm the best analyst. What I'm saying is I don't think he can understand this country as well as I do, who I'm Mexican and I'm here all the time. So what I'm trying to say is this contract suspension, the one that's losing is the U.S. You are missing information that the U.S. government is no longer getting because the America First policy is pushing us out or kicking us out. My understanding of the America policy, when I traveled on behalf of the U.S. government, I did a lot of things as a U.S. government employee or official, if you will, and that entailed using American company airlines, going and lodging yourself in American hotels wherever you went. So to me, that was the America First policy. We had to use everything that was pretty much American on our travels, and to me, that made total sense. But firing someone because he or she is foreigner, I think it just leaves a lot of people out. And well, you know about firing, so whenever I hear people being fired in Washington and everywhere else as federal employees, I get it. I feel for them because I don't think all of those layoffs are justified. That's me getting personal with Trump. We'll get to that. Yes, Larry, could we, or someone could we? Yes.
Thank you. I'm not going to get personal about any personal story. I really want to zero in on your lecture about Obradon and his control over the president, because he has all of his appointees still in place, and that limits what the president can do here in Mexico. Okay, so that particular cartoon is highly individualistic, as if there's only two people involved in that message. And while the Democrats' national party was focused on getting a Democratic president, the Republican Party was just scooping up all the governors in all the states. And what states did they choose? They chose the states that had the most electoral votes. And in the Constitution, who decides how the electoral votes are decided? And that is by the governor.
That's right. I'm sorry. The cartoon, I agree with you that the cartoon is just about two people. What does it tell you about the relationship these two people have? Because we're going to get to that. Does it tell you anything of how the relationship is or how it's going to be?
Could we stick with the subject and
could we put up the cartoon again? Because I do I had even forgotten I had it there, but I want your interpretation of it. What we Mexicans see is an uneven relationship, if you will. But because we're going to move that out in a second, is there someone who can tell me what's the big message there? Is it really easy to understand? what this Mexican cartoonist is trying to say. See where Claudia Sheinbaum is in that. You know, this is not, it's not nice, but
Trump has all the power in this relationship, and she's just, something you wipe away.
some small thing to deal with, right? Yes, yes. And we are not even seeing his face, right? We're seeing something else about him, but okay, thank you. We'll go back to the relationship between these two. I might add,
I'll give a spin on that. So one way that I can read it is that, so Claudia is a pain in the ass, and that he's saying he has her under control because but there's a way that you can see it's just his viewpoint, that it's not reality.
it's good you touch on that, because let's put it up again. Could we? Yes. I'm sorry. How is Claudia represented? You know, what you just said is real. You know, she's not really important. But how is she presented? Like a victim and beautiful? Look at her. Like a witch, pretty much, right? So again, yesterday with the mass media, we were talking about how yesterday we discussed how President Sheinbaum was given a message to the people of Mexico, and her Attorney General and Public Security Secretary, a few minutes after her, were given a message to Washington about the extraditions that we just did. So you need to be very careful with this, because this doesn't mean she's a victim and we all love her and she is where she has been. No, this also means that there's criticism of her on how she's dealing with him. She's not pretty there. She's like, you could almost interpret it like, that's what you deserve, right? There's some Mexicans say, well, might as well suffer a bit, yeah, because not every Mexican likes her. Anyway, these cartoons, you can interpret them any way you want, but I think the exercise is good. You have to take a really good look at them and see what they tell you. It's just an image, so we can all have. Interpretations are valid, all of them, and you're entitled to your opinion, so. Okay, we can get rid of that, and I'll give you another story is that, let me remember that. Oh yes, one thing that happened to Lalo and I, my husband and I, in Puerto Vallarta was, with the first Trump administration, was that Americans would come up to us and apologize to us for what the President of the US said on that specific day. And they would be like, I'm so sorry you had to hear that today. And I'm like, my standard response all those 4 years was always, just make sure you don't re-elect him, okay? And they fulfilled their responsibility. That didn't happen in 2020. What I hear now, I have the same people saying, the other day one of my students, just like you in Vallarta, approached me and said, you know what, Carlos, now I find myself apologizing to Mexicans and Canadians wherever I go for whatever the president said today. So this has expanded everywhere, right? But I want you to, I do know that a lot of people, a lot of you do understand what's going on and how we might not like it all that much. I didn't take it personal that time, but what the story I just told you hadn't happened yet, so it's more personal to me now. All right, okay, we'll do the video thing now. Let's start with a part about a little bit of the history of President Trump not liking us very much. This video doesn't have any audio at all. The audio is not important. I just want you to look at the images and tell me if you can recall them. If you remember when this happened, who's involved, and what the hell was going on here. Take a good look. That's what I'm asking. What year was it? Who's there? Where was this? This is a test for you. I love giving you little quizzes. Right there. We'll leave that there. Anyone remember seeing this? This is Donald Trump. Where were you when this happened? Anything at all? This is the Los Pinos presidential residence. In 2016, Donald Trump was the Republican presidential candidate. And President Peña Nieto, who was actually my boss, got this crazy idea from somewhere, somehow, that was unprecedented and made no sense, to invite him over to Mexico for a tour. He invited Donald Trump, and he also invited Hillary Clinton, who, of course, because she was, and we all political analysts were in a different mind frame with politics, Hillary Clinton said, well, I thank you very much, Mr. President, but I have nothing to do in Mexico City when I have a presidential election here. So what did Trump do? He said, sure, I'll get a chance to go to Mexico City. So what I want you to understand is that this was the very first time Americans got a chance to see Trump next to a president holding a presidential press conference with some nation's national seal there. Could you see it? Huge. So this is the president's residence in Mexico City. So this is the first time a lot of Republicans, I guess, and a lot of the public saw him and then decided that he was presidential. So we have played a terrible role on that, because this image that we gifted the Republican Party, I guess, because he accepted the invitation we issued, actually put him on the spot. You know, he was standing on a podium that is reserved for presidents, you know. This was a scandal. Let's get to that. I do want to give you a little bit more of the context. This was a scandal because this is the news magazine Proceso. This is one of the leaders of the party of the Democratic Revolution. And what we learned how to do yesterday was look at Mexican media and translate the stuff into English. So Trump took over Los Pinos, and President Peña Nieto, that's what EPN means, let him do whatever he wanted. So the president was, there's a little bit of that if you want to take a look. We don't have to read that whole thing. What I'm trying to say here is he was harshly criticized, the president, because where did this crazy idea came from? It came from his finance minister, who was very influential on President Peña Nieto, and he's the one who came up with this idea. Our finance minister was good buddies with Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, right? They were good buddies, and Jared would open the door of the White House eventually to him, but it got so bad, and they both, the finance minister and President Peña Nieto, got in such trouble that he had to resign. He resigned from the post of finance minister, and then they turned him the foreign minister. So I'm not sure where the penalty was, but this was really a scandal. Mexicans did not like having Donald Trump because, you know, if you don't remember that meeting, you won't remember what happened that afternoon. Donald Trump was in Mexico City. They had this seemingly presidential meeting, and then Donald Trump went to Tucson or Phoenix or somewhere there and said, we're going to build a wall. We are not going to let Mexicans through. We're going to deport them all. In brief, we don't like them very much. The very same day he had been in the Mexico City presidential residence. Does this sound like Donald Trump to you? Okay. So we Mexicans were like, everyone is like, why would our president invite him over and give him such a stage? We still don't get it. It was not a good decision. I have to say I was already in Puerto Vallarta, so don't blame me. I would not have suggested that. I was already gone, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of the background context. This is one of the things that happened, but I'll tell you a couple of other stories. So in a nutshell, what happened is that, as everywhere else in the world, Donald Trump wanted to do business in Mexico. So this is the Sin Embargo news site. It's sort of an online thing, but they do a lot of analysis on Mexican politics and a lot of other things. So they had this story about, again, we're not going to read it all. So President Trump tried to do these Trump resorts, you know those. in Baja California Sur and, Baja California. It's funny because people ask me, why is Baja California not Baja California Norte, right? Because it was already there. Somewhere that happens in the US. Is it maybe Virginia and West Virginia? Why is there not an Eastern Virginia or whatever? Well, because that was there already. So Baja California was split in two in 1974, and well, before that, it was a territory, like we said Monday, and then it became a state. Anyway, he invested in Ensenada by Baja California, and then in Quintana Roo, close to Cancun, and then close to Ensenada, to make resorts. So that didn't go very well, as is often the case. And let me open down here to get it to share it with you. But so let's see if you can read the story. Remember, we have subtitles for you. Let me share this interview with you.
El mexicano Donald Trump dice tener una fortuna obtenida por sus negocios. No todos lucen exitosos o de plano parecen fraudulentos. Tiene que
This is Televisa Channel 2, broadcast nationwide and also now on the net, which is what we're doing. But this was broadcast all over Mexico as part of a newscast, okay?
ver este caso que nos va a presentar Guillermo López Portillo. ¿Cómo estás?
¿Qué tal, Carlos?
Guillermo, muy buenos días.
Buenos días. Pues sí, parece que no es tan exitoso este precandidato a la presidencia de los Estados Unidos, porque se ha declarado 4 veces a quiebra en los Estados Unidos, Carlos, y ha estafado a gente, según los testimonios que recogimos, en el norte del país. Vamos a ver. Hace 10 años, Donald Trump encabezó un proyecto para construir 3 torres de superlujo cerca.
Don't ask me why the subtitles don't work with us on this section. Something happens, and we'll come up together, so just ignore them. So I'll translate for you, because otherwise you won't get the story.
Hace 10 años,
10 years ago, Donald Trump decided to invest in Ensenada. 10 years ago is 10 years before 2015 when this was broadcast, okay? Oh, 2016 when he was a candidate.
encabezó un proyecto para construir 3 torres de superlujo
A project to build 3 super luxurious towers
cerca de Rosarito, Baja California.
close to Rosarito, Baja California. Many of you have probably even been there. We're not going to ask what you were doing there, so.
A menos de 1 hora de distancia de San Diego, California.
1 hour away from San Diego, right?
El conjunto se llamaba Trump Ocean Resort,
Trump Ocean Resort was the name of the complex.
en territorio mexicano, en un lugar que así describía el propio Donald.
On Mexican territory, in a spot where Donald Trump himself described as.
Trump en el video de presentación.
One of the things
I knew that was going to happen, but then there's no way you can read all that. So I'm sorry, I'm not sure what that happens, but.
Most love about this project is the fact that it's in Baja, Mexico, and Baja is one of the really hot places. Baja right now is where Cabo was 10 years ago, and you know what happened to Cabo.
Así se expresaba Donald Trump y también su hija Ivanka. Al presentar Trump Ocean Resort, decían que Baja California sería el nuevo desarrollo, tipo Los Cabos.
I'm very, very proud of the fact that when I build, I have investors that follow me all over. They invest in me, they invest in what I build, and that's why I'm so excited about Trump Ocean Resort. This is going to be something very, very special.
Y fue tan especial que de las torres Trump en Baja California, que contarían con 500 unidades o condominios, solo quedó un enorme agujero donde serían los cimientos.
Sí, es una decepción muy grande porque sí, pues fue la confianza que nos dio el señor Trump de que iba a estar aquí y luego el efecto secundario de que se haya ido y que haya dejado todo tirado aquí en Baja California.
Todo empezó en el 2006 cuando la compañía del magnate colocó un anuncio espectacular con la imagen de Donald Trump en el sitio de construcción, la carretera escénica Tijuana-Ensenada.
Pues el hecho de que haya venido Donald Trump aquí a invertir era algo que estábamos viendo como que nos iba a poner más en el mapa todavía.
Los departamentos de Trump Ocean Resort se ofrecieron a precios récord en Baja California, con todos los servicios y amenidades de un hotel.
We are developing a world-class resort befitting of the Trump brand, and I personally am very excited about it. I actually chose to purchase a unit in the first tower.
Sí, viene Ivanka Trump, se promueve bastante, se hace mucha promoción.
Ellos se anunciaron muy bien.
There was a lot of promotion about this. We had Donald Trump's picture on the ground, on the lot.
Por internet y manejaron muy bien, tuvieron un módulo. En un día vendieron la torre. Y hablamos de...
There was a lot of advertising online and everywhere, and in a single day, they sold one of the
condominios de
towers.
$350,000 hasta los $900,000. Estafaron a toda la gente.
Pero nada se construyó en las 7 hectáreas de Punta Bandera. Las torres Trump en territorio mexicano se quedaron solo en sofisticados proyectos arquitectónicos y animaciones.
¿Con qué calidad moral viene? Monta un espectáculo, lo único que hizo fue poner un letrero, aquí se va a construir la Torre Trump. Hubo muchos tijuanenses que fueron defraudados, miles de dólares.
El empresario inmobiliario Gustavo Torres y sus hermanos dieron un depósito de $37,000, el equivalente a unos 500,000 pesos del 2006 para un condominio.
Si no hubiera puesto Donald Trump su nombre, nosotros, así como el 80% de los compradores, no hubiéramos comprado en este desarrollo, porque hay muchos desarrollos más con precios mucho más accesibles y la misma calidad.
Cerca de 200 inversionistas fueron defraudados, la mayoría de California, Las Vegas y Arizona. Eran personas que deseaban retirarse o invertir en el paraíso del Pacífico mexicano. También había compradores de Canadá, Argentina, Irlanda, Corea, Japón, Australia, Nueva Zelanda, la India y un grupo de 5 mexicanos, afirma Gustavo Torres.
Eran 3 torres de condominios y parte era condotel, que era una combinación. Iban a venderse más o menos como 4 o 5 veces más caro que el promedio de ventas en Rosarito y Tijuana, como en $800,000 cada condominio en promedio.
Pero la burbuja de las torres Trump va...
I'll spare you the rest of the ugly details, but what I wanted you to know is that these have been happening already. Like you heard him say, the problem was that if you were American and invested $300,000 to $700,000, you eventually got your money back because you went back to San Diego, or I think Arizona as well, somewhere in Arizona, and you sued him and the company. You're American. That's where a passport color makes a difference, because most of the Americans who were there, at least they got some of the money back, because nothing was built, like you heard. However, those 5 to 10 Mexicans who decided to spend those it said $7,000, but it's really $37,000 as a down payment, they could never get it back. They could not sue this administration in this construction company in the United States, and the Mexican legal system took forever, as you probably know, to solve that. So that background of Mexicans being mistreated by Trump had been going on for a while. I'll also spare you the whole story in Cancun, but it's very similar. It is a Trump resort. There are down payments and a lot of money, and suddenly nothing is built. So first I wanted to ask you if you knew, did you buy any of this? Did you know this was happening? And second, if you knew that Donald Trump started this language. So of course, his game is always, there's someone to blame, right? So it's either the company or Mexican authorities or the Mexican architect or something with the Mexican land. He is never to blame for things, but I did want you to I wanted to give you this context of, well, trouble started long before he actually became a candidate. Remember, the report was 2016, and they're talking about 10 years before, 2006, okay? Any questions on that? Any complaints? Any lawyers you need? Okay, Ensenada, Cancun, and now I'll just share with you. So, the important political question is this: has Mexico had a Miss Universe elected? Don't tell me you don't know. Have we had a Miss Universe when? Yes? Who said yes? About? When about? What's her? Yes. So we've had two. Yes. Let's talk about the first one. Good. Thank you. We're getting there. Let's go back some 20 years, and that's when we got the first Miss Universe. Anyone remember her name? Of course you don't. This is a key, but we're talking about the first one. This is a Lupita what? The last name sounds American, actually. Lupita Jones. Never heard of her? This is a basic question in the Mexican citizenship test. You need to get your act together. You cannot continue on like this. Lupita Jones, Miss Universe, 1991. So I'm bringing her up because, of course, Miss Universe, does that ring a bell with Donald Trump? You tell me, how long was he in charge of that? I'm asking the experts over here. Yes, about 20 years. So he was in charge of Miss Universe. She was Miss Universe, and then she became the, director, manager, whatever, of Miss Universe Mexico. Of course, she had a big deal with Donald Trump because he came out one day with his racist comments, talking about Mexicans and all that, and she did not like that. And that is the reason why the Miss Universe Mexico moved to Miss World or something, right? There's a Miss World and a Miss Universe. There's always conflict when beauty comes about. So I just wanted you to give you this little piece of information because Donald Trump also had a big deal of offense that Lupita Jones did not like. And she was ready not to accept it. And she moved Mexico out of the Miss Universe pageant and it was messy, it was complicated. And then our television stations, networks, had to deal with that and support her. But they also did not like that Trump is trashing Mexico when Mexico is a big member of the whole pageant, right? I was hoping you would know that, but thank you for your help over there. I know this is not basic Mexico information, but this is what these Mexico conversations are all about. That's the whole point, to get you new insights into what's happening. Any questions so far? Any complaints? Anyone leaving? Okay, good. I hope not. Let's go into what Mexicans think about Donald Trump. That'll be a good one. So we saw them in a very different display just a moment ago, but this is much more serious, much more official. So one thing I can tell you, I think I mentioned this when we spoke about Claudia Sheinbaum, because one thing that has changed from the first Trump administration to the second is that we and China are no longer the sole enemies of the US. Donald Trump has gathered and made such a bigger list of this number of enemies and people who don't like the US and people we need to oppose and control, that the silver lining there, the irony is that it's been a little easier for Mexico this time around because he's fighting the European Union and he's trying to, Canada as well, of course, he added that little country up there, Canada, to his list of complaints. So what I see the analysts say, at least he's busy doing some other stuff and he's just focused on China and Mexico. And you know, well, when you get out of Trump's mind for a little while, that's always a good thing. So things have been hard, but they have not been as constant and as repetitive and as intense as they were in the first few months of the first term. Who was president when Donald Trump was president the first time around? When did he, yeah, maybe I didn't phrase it right. So when Donald Trump got into the office the first time, who was our president? This was January 2017, right? Yeah, Peña Nieto, she's perfect. Peña Nieto is the guy we saw there on the first, right? He welcomed him there as a candidate, and then he had, well, yes, I think they met in the White House eventually, but with Donald Trump, things have changed for Mexican presidents because, as you probably remember, the new US president always first met either with the Canadian or the Mexican leader. Remember those days? Those were the first presidents who would, or the prime minister who would actually go to the White House to meet him. That is all long gone. And has Claudia Sheinbaum met with him? So what she's saying there's Claudia Sheinbaum, believe it or not, and she's saying, relax, I've had him under control. That's what she's saying. So I put that up because now is the time to hear you, and I'd like to hear how you think Claudia is managing or dealing with Trump. Do you approve? If she had you in her office, what would you advise for 5 minutes? President Sheinbaum, I think you should be doing this, but not this. I'm a Trump expert, you would say. I think you should do this. What would you recommend her? Or what have you heard about her? Or what is your impression of her specifically in dealing with Donald Trump personally and then with his administration? I know this is a tough question, and I know it can get long to answer, but I'd like to hear. This is the time when I think it's fair to hear your opinion.
There seems to be an impression that Claudia is a Trump whisperer in the way she's handled him.
A Trump what?
Whisperer.
Oh, okay. Does that mean that, explain that to me. See if I'm understanding right.
That means that she has figured him out and knows how to handle him.
Okay. I thought that's what it was. I think I told you Tuesday that what I've been hearing from some women is that we saw her family on Tuesday. How many children does she have? Remember that?
2.
Are both of them hers?
No.
So because she has a daughter and then a stepson, women, Mexican, but mostly American women tell me this is why she does so well with him. He knows how to handle small brats, right? So that's usually what I hear. I'm like, well, maybe there's a reason, yeah. Do Mexicans think she is handling him well? Do Mexicans what are your Mexican friends telling you about her handling of Donald Trump? Don't tell me you haven't been talking to them. I think Mexicans don't always approve of the way she is doing things. Don't. I think we believe that she is letting him get away with things, and he is complying too much. So our perception is she has a public voice where she talks about sovereignty. We talked that about yesterday. Sovereignty is a must word when Mexicans talk about the United States or the US president. And then she has her officials in the military and the Attorney General and all that comply with Donald Trump's demands. And part of the criticism is that the more he gives her, the more she gives him, the more it is expected, it is bound to happen that he will demand even more. That's one of our concerns. Any of your views, do you agree with these Mexicans? I'm talking about Mexicans who write columns, who are analysts, who are academics. I'm not so much talking about people down here on everyday life, but yes. You can borrow this.
Oh, thank you. I was just going to say I really agree with what you said. I think the perception, at least from the United States perspective, is she's strong. She's telling Trump, you want us to stop, narcos? You stop the guns, mister, like giving it back to him sort of thing. But clearly based on the cartoons and the belief that Mexican citizens have, like she's not being perceived as strong and standing up to him. So it's very interesting to me that there's such a juxtaposition.
Yes, give me a minute. Thank you for that, because I was having a very similar conversation with someone from the group, maybe Tuesday, and the thing I said, her perception, she's American, her perception was that she's doing very well, she's tough, and my answer was, and I'll repeat it now, is the big test for any foreign leader with Donald Trump at this time is an Oval Office meeting. Has she had one? So when that happens, if it ever happens, I think we will really know. Who can you call victors or success stories after leaving that crazy Oval Office after meeting the president. Can you tell me a couple of names of people who went out, world leaders who said, Zelensky didn't do very well, did he? Who did, but my question is, who did well? Who came out of there in one piece? Carney did quite well. You know what Macron has mastered? The handshake. He's gotten that shake down to a technique, and he has been dealing with that very well. We believe that the German chancellor, I can't remember his, what's the German chancellor? Yes.
Can I?
Yes.
And I happen to be Canadian, and I've watched everything that's been happening in Canada. And, you know, Canada is, and I can tell you, is really pissed off. Big time. I mean, I don't think people realize the extent to which Canada is pissed off. But the argument going on in Canada, we did reply with tariffs and put tariffs on, and then Sheinbaum didn't do anything, and Sheinbaum and it appeared in the papers that it was Sheinbaum that was winning, and that we had gone too tough. And so it's still an interesting argument. Like, why did Sheinbaum appear in some suspects to do better than Carney, who decided, look, we're going to take you on.
But
and
here,
this is so it's an interesting dilemma.
it is interesting, and here again I would take you to the Prime Minister visiting the Oval Office. How did he do? How did that go?
Our Prime Minister?
Yes, yes. How did he do in the White House?
It went really well. It went really well.
See?
And the reason I'll tell you that it went well, because he is really smart. He's one of the smartest guys. Some people say he's one of the smartest guys around, but he is very smart and really knows how to deal with people. And I don't even know how Trump can talk to him. You know, given what Trump
I was going to say, did Canadians approve of his attitude in the White House?
How about 85%?
There you go. Cool. Okay. You know, what I'm going to say is being smart is not all you need to deal with Donald Trump.
I know,
that helps, but it's not.
But that's the thing that he's got that's more than that. Yes. You know?
Yeah. But if I could say...
Canadian as well, right?
Yeah, I'm Canadian. Cool. And so when Carney landed, wherever it is they land, for his meeting with Trump, the minute he landed, Trump made a nasty comment about something like, I don't know why he's coming. Carney was 30 minutes late arriving at the White House.
Cool, thank you for sharing.
Nobody knows where he went.
He went missing for a few minutes. Okay, I didn't know that. Thank you.
As another Canadian, I would like to say it's Carney's diplomacy. He doesn't say anything nasty to the guy. He doesn't even tell him what we're doing. We've done so many things by changing laws, burying people in paperwork that are costing the Americans billions of dollars. But he doesn't mention that to Trump. He's just very diplomatic, speaks very nicely to everybody, shakes his hand, and doesn't give away
the less you say, the better, actually. You know.
That's right. He's very diplomatic. Yes. And we're proud of him for that.
Thank you, Canadians, for sharing, because one thing in Mexico we could not understand was after the election, seeing Prime Minister Trudeau take on a plane and fly to Mar-a-Lago. And President Sheinbaum said, that's never going to happen. I'm not going to go there. He's not even the president yet, even he's president-elect. So we were very disappointed at seeing Trudeau. And, you know, he paid a high price for that, I guess. And he was mistreated there at the,
Carlos.
you know.
So I have a couple of comments right here.
Oh.
It isn't simply about anger, it's also about leverage. I mean, give me here a few examples.
Sure.
Canadian resident return trips from the U.S. by car fell 37% year over year to 1.7 million. Return trips by air from the U.S. dropped 25%. Overseas trips by Canada to other countries went up 6%. In other words, the way it's being manifested is Canadians are boycotting the United States, including, for example, the decision by the Girl Guides, who are the equivalent of the Girl Scouts, to have no trips from Canada to the United States. Carney is canceling the F-35 contract. Carney has abandoned NORAD and instead is using the Australian polar radar surveillance system. He's completely restructuring the financial relationship of Canada militarily to the US and going to the EU.
Tell me about Carney and Mexico. Has anything changed in his treatment or policies to Mexico?
I don't know.
You're Mexican. This is your job to know. Thank you for that. Yes, we've noticed that. I was going to ask Canadians if many more Canadians are coming here to Mexico.
Wait.
Give me a second. I want to point this out because we seem to see in Puerto Vallarta, there's still a lot of Canadians as it is, but we get a feeling that people are not going to Vegas or Florida, but maybe Puerto Vallarta or Ajijic or that. So can Canadians feel that more people are willing to come to Mexico? Cool, that's good news to us.
They are.
There's always a silver lining with this administration.
And I just want to add one more thing that's been boycotted. The province of Ontario has one of the largest purchasers of alcohol in the world, and all of Canada just about has taken all American liquor off the shelves and is not selling. You can't purchase it in Canada. I mean, and that was a thing that caught a lot of people's attention. And there's border towns along the border in Canada that they don't know what to do. They're going bankrupt.
I am really hoping you guys are drinking much more tequila now. Is that happening?
There are 3 distilleries in Kentucky that have gone bankrupt because we're not buying bourbon. And that's the impact of that quiet diplomacy. We're not going to scream and yell. We're not going to buy your shit. That's it. That's basically it.
That's not very diplomatic, but I get the point. I get the point.
There was a Facebook kind of letter, and it was fact-checked that it wasn't from Claudia. But the essence of it was, okay, build your wall. You don't understand that we've got 500,000 people on the other side that buy your products, that won't buy your products. Okay, build your wall. We don't have to send our avocados to you. Build your wall. The people who go on vacations that used to come to Disneyland, build your wall. They'll come to Mexico. I mean, it was a really good letter that was accredited to Claudia, that it was fact-checked that she didn't send it. But it just listed out what would happen.
I was going to say.
Oh, it listed out. Build that wall, isolate yourself. You don't know about the other billions of people in the world. You think you're the only ones? You're not.
I put that carton up with Donald Trump going crazy and all that, and Claudia there, because every world leader has had to find new ways of dealing with them. This is not a standard U.S. administration. But thank you for that, because yes, just as Canadians are no longer not going as much to the U.S. as they used to, Mexicans are not going as much either. Even the border, and you're accustomed to go to get your groceries in San Antonio and come back, you're probably still doing that. But if you're planning on visiting New York or Disneyland and all that, you're having second thoughts, and now we're getting a $250 entrance fee. I'm not sure if you know that. The new beautiful bill
tell you on the phone.
has approved that now just for entering the U.S. we'll have to pay. We visa holders, U.S. visa holders, will have to pay $250 just for the privilege.
Over here, a quick comment vis-a-vis Mexico, Canada, in that I was reading today that Canada now buys more vehicles from Mexico than the United States does.
And along that line, we know as Canadians we're going to have to suffer economically. We've lost jobs, we lost, manufacturing capacity, but we're in for it. That's why we voted for him. We knew it was going to happen from the beginning, and it's not something we're not used to. So it's like, okay, we'll take it.
I thank you for that, and I also thank you for all the statistics and all that. Yes, because this politics is not just raw politics; it has to do with economics. Canada and Mexico are like, we're going to have to deal with him. And when Carney says, I'm just going to be nice and be polite and all that, it's because of the economy. And when Sheinbaum, that letter I don't think is hers, but this is her attitude. It's like, okay, we can deal with you. We'll sell it somewhere else. But these are processes that take years, right? Getting Germany or China. The fact is, we are looking for China to sell much more stuff now because the U.S. is not taking our tomatoes now. So we're ready to trade even more with China. We have a huge deficit, trade deficit with them, but we're ready to do this with other countries, China included.
It's very obvious that Trump has no respect for anyone in the rest of the world, including the leaders of the various countries all over the world, which is why he thinks he can do without them. And it's to his own loss because it's going to hurt a lot of people,
Remember the G7? Where was the last G7 summit held? Canada. Canada keeps coming up. How come if this is U.S.-Mexico thing? Where was this summit? I can't even pronounce that. Northern Alberta, okay? But isn't Calgary somewhere there? Okay. Calgary I can pronounce, but yes, thank you for that. I bring up the G7 summit because what happened there with Sheinbaum, she was there. Now we have a president, President Sheinbaum, who travels the world. When President López Obrador was here, was the president, he took one trip abroad. Where to? He got a call from the White House and said, you know who said, I want you here. And he flew to Washington. And that was pretty much it. He might have been going to what's the ASEAN Summit, is it? He might have been in LA for the Asian Pacific Summit. But no more than that, no more than 2 trips. He did not like, he always said, President López Obrador, that the best foreign policy is domestic policy. We did not like that. We want our president to go and meet the presidents and make business and deals and all. So Clara Sheinbaum is like, I'll go, no problem at all. So she was in Calgary. What happened then? Why did she not meet Trump as it was planned there in Calgary? You made me think of that because he's like, he could not wait another few hours because Iran was going crazy to meet with her. And we Mexicans did not like that. And I'm sure President Sheinbaum did not like that. So I insist, one of the big tests that we Mexicans still yet to pass or endure or fail is the Oval Office meeting, but she has not been invited. And I guess due to protocol, he has been invited. But to be honest, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. I don't think he's really wishing to have her there, even though I have to say that President Trump has spoken very nicely of her, which is something he's not very used to doing. It doesn't come easy. So he's been very polite, and he has indeed been, she hasn't been able to delay this tariff thing that's getting everyone crazy. We Mexicans don't think it's really a solution, but many of us do agree that it's better than nothing having that tariff craziness delayed. Yes.
I'm thinking that these are all important points and these are all happening, but it's actually, there could be a deeper design or a bigger design because these are all little disasters and we of course have to respond to them, but it's like in football, where you play the ball, but the bigger game, and that I don't think he has loyalty to America. I think he's he's a destroyer by nature, and his allegiance, isn't to America. And it's so obvious with the way that he's talked about the military and how there's like strange things, and the whole thing about what country, how he makes enemies, and now he's making an enemy of DC. So I just think there's things there's small things that are happening, and there's large things that are happening, and that the news is not reporting a lot of just simple factual stuff.
Yeah, again, this is good news to us that he's fighting the DC mayor, because then he's doing something else instead of focusing on Mexico. The Epstein files.
Google's for Epstein have gone down by 87%. So he's very effective at taking the view off of a problem.
I've spoken how the Lopez Obrador administration and Claudia Sheinbaum's administration a little bit, and the Trump movement, MAGA, are similar, because when you say the news is not reporting, the press is not reporting this is because they're overwhelmed. So much stuff is going on everywhere that they can hardly breathe to report it all. That is why we have a daily 2-hour presidential news conference. Did you know that? Ever since 2018, when President Lopez Obrador came, every day at 7 in the National Palace, the president delivers a 2-hour, 1.5, 3-hour, it all depends, press conference. This is the same technique. This is throwing a lot of things at the press and also controlling the political message. The press conference is not really designed here in the National Palace to inform Mexicans and tell foreign leaders. The idea is to hold on to the agenda. I want the press to discuss this, so I'm going to bring it up in the presidential podium. You call that the loudspeaker, what do you call it? Bully pulpit, yes, that's exactly what it is, yes. And, this is not it's not as harsh as it is in the US, and this lack of unity I'm talking about is also not as hard or harsh as in the US, but it is happening here as well, because that press conference is every day for 2 hours, and we don't watch it, but we read about it in the news, right? We Mexicans have other things to do than listen to her 2 hours, but we do read the press and watch the broadcast, and there she is with her message, right? Yes.
I think Sheinbaum is doing something similar to Carney, just from what I've read, where she doesn't engage at his level of fighting. She is much better at negotiating, but I think she's doing a lot of things with other countries. She sent a representative to the BRICS meeting and things like that. So I think she's building a new trade network for Mexico, at the same time keeping the door open with the United States, because you can't transition overnight like that. So to me, she's playing it quite smart. And one thing I'm going to credit Donald Trump with is, well, maybe two. One, I think the high approval rating of Carney owes somewhat to Trump, because he united, I think Trump is the most important source for uniting all Canadians together in support of their prime minister. And I forget just offhand what the other one is, but
I will add the other credit, the silver lining in this Trump administration. The fact that I'm here having a small business talking to you is thanks to him getting rid of me. So you have him to thank. Okay?
Well, I'll say the other is he's bringing down the level of the United States in terms of power and the esteem that the world has for us, and that is creating space for both Mexico and Canada to rise up, and we're becoming 3 more equal countries, and I think we're all going to hurt in the process, maybe Americans more than anyone, But in the long term, as you say, I think in the long term, we're all going to be better off for this shift of power.
I hope someone's listening, because, yeah, we need to keep the hope up. I agree. Yes?
So we have some question in Zoom chat. One, and this goes back a little bit. When does the $250 visa fee take effect for citizens of the USA?
No, well, this is for Mexicans. What I meant is, we Mexicans, anyone who doesn't have a free waiver visa thing, like the European Union, upon entering the US, we will have to pay $250, which I understand can be refunded through some bureaucratic process that hasn't been designed later. You know, this brings me back to the I-90 form, Canadians. Did you know what that was before Donald Trump came back to the White House?
Yeah.
Right? You have to go in, you're from Canada, you travel to the US, and you need to fill out an I-90 form, right?
Right.
I think most Canadians didn't even know that existed. We did. We Mexicans were always required to fill that out at the airline, put it in, and then when you, the goal of that piece of paper is that when you leave the country, the US, you give it back, and the US knows you left. But Canadians was like, I'm coming in, I'm coming out, and suddenly the Trump administration says, where's your I-90 form? And you're like, what? This is the same. It hasn't been implemented. I understand it will come in with the fiscal year in October 1 in the US, and then when you get to an airport or whatever, this will be a fee required. It's like a tourist fee that in Guatemala costs $20, but now the US is going to be $250. They've been debating it, and it was inside this new bill, so it's been approved. A lot of things were in that big bill that I think we're only now understanding were there. Or I think lawmakers are understanding were there. So, yes.
Well, I know one thing that's in there that I think a lot of people don't realize is apparently beginning January 1 of next year, there is a 1% remittance that's going to cost Mexicans like 25 million, but it's going to cost any of us that move money into Mexico through banks, transfers, whatever, there's going to be a 1% fee to the United States.
I'm really glad you brought that point up because that was a big issue. You know, the top foreign exchange source in Mexico of US dollars are remittances from workers abroad. It's no longer petroleum, it's no longer automotive, it's people sending their money, which we call remesas, remittances. And this is where Claudia Sheinbaum comes in as well, because the bill first considered 5%. It's a tax. You wire money from Tucson to Oaxaca, and right now you can do it. We had an issue with that before, and the US government, the Mexican government, worked it out with the companies. There's a wire company that's not a bank that's really, yes, like really. So they were like, it wasn't taxes, but commissions. And we got them to bring down the commission. The commission's still there, but this is a private commission for the service. What you're talking about, rightly so, is a 1% tax for the government because you're sending money back to Mexico from the US. It used to be 5%, and Sheinbaum and her government talked to lawmakers, talked to Trump, and said, come on, bring it down a bit, and it went down from 5 to 1. So, but yes, this is a lot of money, yes. Every month, Mexicans send about $12.5 billion to the US. It's a lot of money that comes in. Like I said, it's more than from anything else. So again, it has to do with politics, but economics as well. Economics is always there behind Claudia's head when there's a political decision to be made, because there's a lot of tools that Donald Trump and his Republican administration have to make us suffer in a way, right? Yes. Thank you for that. I'm always accused of not giving you breaks. So we could have one now, if you agree. And we'll come back to the same topic and the same emphasis on Mexicans and the Donald Trump administration. Thank you. Thank you, Didi. That was Teacher Didi making sure you're paying attention. Okay, what we're going to do now is, so you get a break from me, and we all get a break from each other. We are going to hear a member, a group members of this red circle I talk you about, analysts who know the things allegedly. You can agree with them or not, but I want you to hear the Mexican opinion maker story about this. Was just when he was elected. I don't think President Trump had been in office yet, but I want you, especially about how to negotiate with him and all these details, because these are interesting people who really go deeply into the issues. Again, this is Televisa, our major national network. This was broadcast on the air in the morning, and this is just a series of invited analysts who are talking with the anchor about the incoming second Trump administration. Are the subtitles giving you a lot of trouble? Are they kind of, they sometimes go really fast, sometimes not, but I know you have a great sight, because yesterday I have someone out there reading from here, so I was impressed. Anyway, if you are having troubles with them, come on over here, and I promise not to give you a hard time if you move over here. I'll try not to, though.
Javier, el tono ya lo impuso Donald Trump como candidato en su último día de campaña con esta advertencia, amenaza hacia la presidenta. Por cierto, hablando de ella con su nombre y apellido.
Yo creo que sí, pero es el tono que siempre ha tenido Donald Trump, es decir, no nos debe de sorprender, es un tono agresivo, es alguien que negocia de esa manera, que uno se siente en la mesa de negociación pensando que uno va a negociar con peras y manzanas y el señor llega con una sandía y te la impone y ahora tienes que lidiar con esa sandía, pero sobre todo creo que llega este momento después, yo diría, de casi 16 años de desgaste en la relación bilateral. Esto empieza desde Obama, es una relación bilateral que no se le ha dado mantenimiento al más alto nivel. En los 8 años de Obama no se le dio realmente un buen mantenimiento. Después vino en los 4 años de Trump, todavía menos. Después con Biden 4 años tampoco se le dio ese mantenimiento. Entonces llega Trump o regresa Trump a la Casa Blanca en ese contexto de un enorme desgaste y yo creo que sin la más mínima intención de fortalecer la relación bilateral. Es alguien que no le importa mucho la relación bilateral, es alguien que no conoce y no le interesa México. Parece que sí, porque toca temas que tocan muy directamente a México, pero para él son temas internos, nacionales, con los que conecta con su base y no temas bilaterales en los que él está dispuesto a escuchar el lado mexicano. Viene a imponer, viene a seguir conectando con su base, usando a México para ese propósito, pero no a entender y menos a negociar.
Let's make a stop there. We have a young lady after him, but I think you got those 2 messages that's given. I really like his quote on watermelons, because this is exactly how it feels. Everyone is prepared, and you know, even going into the Oval Office, you're the president or the prime minister, and you go in there planning on coming. You have 20 advisors telling you what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to shake the hands and everything, and then suddenly everything changes, and you really need to be prepared. Like I said, being smart helps, but there's a lot of other things going on in that Oval Office right now. I really like what he said. What else did he say that is really relevant? Could you get that we Mexicans...
The fact that he approaches everything with an aggressive tone.
What did he say about that? Should we be surprised?
Probably not.
Again, we are kind of used to that. We've had a, what is it before you get married? A prenuptial thing. Yeah. A party. This is a really crazy thing that we Mexicans have a hard time understanding. So isn't that this before like 1 week or something before the wedding that you have a party that's kind of like how things are going to work? And then you have the real thing, a rehearsal. We Mexicans like, you rehearse a party, a ceremony? We cannot understand that. We watch movies and it's the rehearsal and Mexicans are looking at each other. What are they even doing? What is this all about? So, this is not today's topic, but I just wanted to point out that we don't get it, okay? What other topic did Javier Tello have?
Well, he said that
Trump doesn't really care about a relationship with Mexico. But I thought it was also interesting how he went back in history, even to Obama, and say that, you know, that relationship has been, well, deteriorating or at least not maintained since then.
Yes, that's so Donald Trump doesn't care about Mexico as such. What does he care about? Who else does Javier Tello talk about there?
His base.
His base. These are messages that he's giving not to the president, not to the government of Mexico, not to President Sheinbaum, not to the, he's talking to his base all the time. And his base loves when Mexico is the enemy and we send them migrants and all of that, right? So there's this, he could do it very well. But yes, this is not only a Donald Trump thing, it is true. However, I worked for a president when President Obama was the president, and the tone was not like this. You know, I've been to 2 Obama speeches in Mexico City and 1 presidential press conference. My goodness, there was respect, there was dialogue, there was, maybe he went back to the White House or Chicago or Hawaii, wherever he went, and things didn't turn out that way exactly. But the diplomacy, the tone, and the respect was there. You know, Obama in his speeches, he would quote the Mexican Constitution and the Mexican national anthem. You know, he was pretty much prepared, and we love listening to our national anthem on the voice of a US president. That's not happening a lot lately, but yes, it's a tone, it's not as important, but it's a diplomatic thing that we've now forgotten about because we're so used to that not being there. But it existed. With Biden, of course. Yeah, I was, I had a chance to be with Vice President Biden when he's here. I was with President Peña Nieto. We were to a meeting with this finance minister I just spoke about that got into a lot of trouble for suggesting we bring Donald Trump. So but Vice President Biden was there, and the finance minister was there as well, and they were presiding, and they were speaking about these public-private partnerships that to Biden were really important, and to President Peña Nieto as well. And you know, it was all very gentle, it was all, you know, you know how President Biden won. He was the vice president, so we're there, there's a lot of officials. I'm there with my chief of staff, boss, but then what we did not like was suddenly, because there's always this dependency and superiority thing with the US government. It has to happen, even with previous US administration. So we're there, and Vice President Biden was supposed to go to the Los Pinos presidential residence to meet the president after this meeting. So he's like, he was really polite because he gets up, someone comes up to his ear, the vice president, and tells him, this is about time we go. And he's like, you know how he was? He's like, I think this is the time to go because we don't want a president waiting for a vice president. So I'm going to make haste and get there, right? So, you know, he was really very polite, and they could just acknowledge that we want a little bit of the same equal treatment that some of you have already spoken about. Okay, let's hear another lady here and see what we can discover.
Fer Caso, en una de las palabras que más te gusta, esto es un déjà vu, esto no parece, sino que es un déjà vu. ¿Qué diferencias hay frente a hace 8 años?
Bueno, la primera es que ahora Donald Trump ya no tiene nada que perder porque ya no tiene una elección de frente y no tiene que convencer a sus electores de lo que viene. Así que vamos a ver a un Donald Trump pues mucho más agresivo, si es posible eso todavía. Un Donald Trump que además ha dicho a lo largo de la campaña que uno de los peores errores que cometió en su primer periodo fue poner gente dentro de las decisiones de poder que no le era absolutamente leal. Entonces vamos a ver a un Donald Trump rodeándose de gente que le diga que sí a todo, ya no personas que lo cuestionen o que tal vez tengan cierta experiencia o capacidad técnica. Creo que esas son tal vez las dos principales diferencias. La tercera, que es muy importante en relación con México, es que tenemos un tratado distinto al que teníamos cuando él entró al gobierno. Un tratado que él mismo negoció y que pues ya no dice que es el peor tratado que ha firmado Estados Unidos, el peor tratado del mundo. Ahora es un tratado que él hizo y que de alguna forma esperaríamos que defendiera y que incluso en esta revisión del 2026 pues pensaríamos que fuera eso, exactamente una revisión y no una renegociación. Ahora, siendo un déjà vu, lo que sí podemos estar seguros es que va a ser una montaña rusa, porque eso fueron los primeros 4 años de la relación, en donde Nos despertábamos un día con el tuit que ponía en riesgo el comercio, otro día diciendo que iba a mandar militares a la frontera. Es decir, tenemos que esperar que van a ser 4 años complicados.
4 complicated years. What was she talking about? She knows nothing, right? Do you agree or not? What else did she say? She was going a little fast for those you Spanish fluent speakers. But what were her point? I want to go to one really good point. The third is very economic and it has to do with, did you get that?
Well, I thought the brilliant thing that she said was that he's going to surround himself with yes people, and that he's going to not be restrained at all like he was in his first term, which is exactly what happened.
And like I said, he had just been elected. He wasn't in office yet. We didn't know we kind of knew what was coming, but not exactly. So yes, I want to underscore when she says the third topic we have to deal with is this trade agreement, right? What's happening with that crazy trade agreement? What are you feeling? Is it still there? Or is it in the garbage bin, in the trash can somewhere? What's your impression? Let me show you something. So one of the first thing we want to ask is, who created these? Yes.
And Trump has put 35% tariffs on Canadian car parts going in. It was the best deal ever because he did it, but then it was garbage. And which has led the world to not believe, or to believe that if you make a trade deal with him, it means nothing because he'll change his mind. The taco man.
Yes, remember when he said NAFTA was the most awful, terrible thing that ever happened to the US? So now he's going back to that. The problem he has is that he is the one who created this, forced us, Canada and Mexico, to sign this agreement. And now the agreement is there. It was improved with things. Things were required. Mexico had to change a few laws to comply with this new USMCA agreement. Let me see if I can. Yesterday we talked about, not yesterday, but Tuesday, about the presidential sash. Remember that? And we talked about the colors and how that was a big mess. So I want to take you, let's see if we can do that. Bear with me for that image because I hadn't planned on that today, so it'll take me a second. I think someone told me just now that we need to talk about the economics of the things and trade, and she was telling me that Canada has been changing some things in manufacturing, in industry, in laws, and to react to this craziness in the United States. And she's asking me, is Mexico doing the same? We have to do the same. Otherwise, we won't survive. The economy is really the one issue. The economy and drug cartels and the US invasion are the two issues that are really keeping us on the edge. But I wanted you to see this because, so NAFTA, what did NAFTA stand for? North American Free Trade Agreement. Who came up with that craziness? Who signed that? No. I'm sorry, Bush did, yes, with our President Salinas. And who was in Canada? Was it Mulroney in 1994? You don't have as many prime ministers as the UK, though, so you should remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter. What I want to underscore is this was a kind of friendly North American free trade agreement. So I brought up the presidential sash because in politics, everything has a meaning. And when Donald Trump came up with the idea of we need to just get rid of that and create a new accord, how did he call it? What's the new accord called in the United States? Do you say USMCA or USMCA or something? I guess you say USMCA. So who comes first in this acronym? He wanted the US to come first. But then you go to Canada and you say, hey, this is a North American agreement. I'm not going to have the US first in that acronym. I'm going to have Canada first in my agreement. CUSMA, Canada, United States, Mexico agreement. That's fair, isn't it? I'm Canadian. I'm not going to have the US first. What it comes down to Mexico and what do we Mexicans decide to do? Tratado México, Estados Unidos, Canada. The treaty Mexico, United States, Canada. This is the division thing that I'm telling you about. We have had issues with Canada because of all of this messing and because of the second Trump administration. He is a dividend, remember that. And even using an acronym will stand as his USA first thing. I want you to notice that because, oh, well, whatever the name of the treaty, this is the name he came up, and he will never refer to it as CUSMA or TEMEC. I can guarantee you that. We say TEMEC, our president will speak about TEMEC, and I'm sure the prime minister talks about the CUSMA and nothing else. So this is like we all have our interest. We are working together because we have together, but this is not the ideal. Whereas in NAFTA, NAFTA took years to create. These are free trade agreements that take months and negotiations and ministries and secretaries and departments to create. And he is negotiating with the UK and Japan in a telephone call in 48 hours. My belief is that a free trade agreement does not work like that. These are tariff agreements. I will bring mine down, you bring yours down, and then we kind of settle for a number. That's it. These are not really free trade agreements. So I'm bringing all this up to you because the agreement is really very important for us, for Mexico, and I'm sure it is for Canadians as well. So when he starts mangling with playing with an agreement, so Canada got 35%, am I right? Just now? We know that changes all the time. How is Mexico doing? Yes, just let me get the question through. What is Mexico paying now? 35 in Canada, Mexico?
15. Yeah.
Add 10 to that. You guys are Mexican. You're here. You're supposed to. 25%. We are stuck at 25%, and that was delayed for 90 days. So it might. However, let me clear out because the treaty has a lot to do with that. 25% of everything that is not included in the treaty. He is still respecting the treaty. So you're always getting ahead of me, aren't you? So that means that 86.5% of all Mexican products do not pay a tariff when they go to the US. I want you to know that this is why the treaties are important. And this is why they take forever to be created, because then that screw you put on the second tire of the Nissan that's built in Cuernavaca, but that has a bumper that came from Detroit, pays this crazy tariff table that has to be considered for the eventual tariff. So each and every of those products parts are included in the treaty and other parts are not, it's crazy. I don't know how US Customs does this, because it's taking into account the treaty is really very complicated to figure that out for a Nissan or a Volkswagen or whatever takes off into the US. And that is changing, and as we've heard, Mexican entrepreneurs and Mexican companies and foreign companies in Mexico especially are having a really hard time deciding what to invest on, what to do or not. The Nissan factory in Cuernavaca that has been there for 60 years, the Nissan factory in Cuernavaca was the first Nissan factory ever not to be built outside of Japan. And they just closed down. They did not go back to the US, but they closed down and moved to Saltillo, I believe. They have another plant and they move everything there, much, much closer to the US. I was just reading yesterday, the General Electric company in the US. I think the headquarters are in Louisville. Does that sound right? Anyway, you know, General Electric is huge. The appliance factory that they had, where was this? I think it was just outside of Mexico City. That's closing down and it's moving back to Louisville, the whole thing. So the fact is that these Trump policies that are only starting are already moving investment and companies out of Mexico or into Mexico. You know, it's really a changing scene. What are the Chinese doing in their economic relation with Mexico? How is China playing these cards? Have you thought? It was kind of coming in big. We have whole sets of factories in Nuevo León, really close to Texas, full of Chinese companies. So what Donald Trump wants is, because China is again the enemy, so the Chinese are also reconsidering whether they want to make those investments in Mexico or not. And what they are doing is making investments that do not relate, trying to get investments or projects that do not relate to the US directly, like the Mexico City Querétaro train. Ever heard of that? The Chinese are going to help us build that. But that has nothing to do with Laredo and beyond, right? So he's kind of trying to forcing us to be more domestic in a way. And, like you rightly said over there, to find new public markets, international markets for our products. Any disagreements? You know, you can disagree with me and contradict me. It's fine. You can do that. Okay, is that, I talked Tuesday, I think, about the nearshoring part of things. Nearshoring, which is pretty much taking companies out of China and into Mexico to sell in the United States or to deliver in the United States. That is not going very well on this Trump administration because he doesn't want that to happen. He wants the factory to actually go into the US. What's your opinion on that? Is that an easy thing to do, bringing GM back to, if not Detroit, Tennessee?
Well, I'll say that nearshoring, technical nearshoring is happening still, of software in particular. And we just met 2 weeks ago when we came back, we met 2 women who are coming down to work on software. Yeah, they're coming into Guadalajara. And I think, but software development is also, there's this AI thing coming, and it's so expensive in the States that it, and nearshoring, actually he was working in partly that, and it's India that Mexico is replacing because for one thing, Mexicans, it's closer, so time zone-wise, you can work with them easier. And culturally, their English is actually easier to understand. And one of the critiques I've heard at Geek Beers is that the Mexicans are so freaking polite. You can't just call them up. You're just like, how are things? How's your family? And so it's, there's a beautiful thing. I'm going to slip in that I would love to hear about, too, what you think will happen if the United States of Trump pursues the cartels, and maybe what are Mexicans going to do? What are we going to do if we're invaded?
Oh, you want to move from economics to guns. Cool, we can do that. Yes?
I just have a quick thing about the economics of trying to move manufacturing to the States. There are hundreds of thousands of jobs in manufacturing that they can't fill now. So if you put more manufacturing there, who do they think? They don't want immigration. They don't want the migrants from, so who do they think are going to work in them?
Automation.
Not all of that works.
I don't have the answer to that. You know, you make some questions. When I was trained as an analyst by the US government up there in Langley, that's a beautiful place. We were trained in 3 types of analysis. One was descriptive analysis. This is what happened. Another one was when they were higher up, higher grade, pay grade, they would say, no, I want explanatory analysis. I want to know what happened and why. Okay. And then if you were really important, you could ask for predictive analysis. You know, this is what happened, this is why it happened, and we believe this is what will happen. You guys are asking me for only predictive analysis, and you're not paying me enough for that. So, so your tough questions are predictive analysis. To be honest, I don't have the answer to that, but another saying we have as analysts is we need to wait for the dust to settle first and see what happens. The problem with the second Trump administration is the dust never settles. You know, we've been months. So yes, I like what you're saying. We don't really know. I think the Mexican government as well is also moving to adapt these policies, because not only the Mexican government, but Mexican businessmen and investors and businesswomen and everyone is trying to adapt to a changing mood in Washington. And you know, the truth, one thing that I see sometimes with American expats that they are sometimes not really conscious of is how much the rules are made or were made by the US. When we have a US president like President Trump come in and say, I'm no longer going to be paying fees at UNESCO, or I'm going to walk out of the World Health Organization, or I don't want to support the World Fund or the World Bank or whatever, we are all startled because these are American institutions more than world institutions. And you know, the US government and the United States has the privilege of printing the world's money, you know? I was really happy when the US bond market kind of shook a little bit, because that was 10 seconds when Donald Trump said, maybe I shouldn't move the boat that much. Maybe I shouldn't move things around that much. And he got a little bit scared and then brought down all those tariffs. But to us, the world, remember when President Barack Obama said, the country's currency is going to continue to be the US dollar. No new currency is going to come. And he said that because China was saying, you know, we're going to introduce our yuan, what is it, yuan? Yuan, I'm sorry, as the world currency. But today, some years have passed since Obama, how is Brazil getting paid for their exports to China? Have you ever wondered? Are they getting US dollars for their products sent to China, or what? Brazil businessmen are saying, we'll take Chinese yuan and then handle them here with the Brazilian real. So we don't have to go through New York and get all that changes and work with US dollar, which is what the whole world does. When I sell something to the US, India, China, Europe, they get US dollars. That is the world's currency. It's also what you go down to the OXXO, well, not the OXXO, the 7-Eleven, I guess, in the US to buy. But many of you don't understand how much when a US government or Treasury Department or the Federal Reserve change things, we all stand to suffer, because this is the money we use for trade. And this is why it's so ingrained that these changes are happening, and everyone is like, should we, shouldn't we, what should we do, okay? But yeah, that's a very good point.
The 5 minutes ago comment. When I lived here about 50 years ago or 40 years ago, there were Volchos all over the place, the German Beatles. Now, when I travel Mexico, I see Build Your Dream, the Chinese electric car that's being built here in the north. And I think that's going to be part of the future here more than the Volcho. Second point to that is Guadalajara used to be the second largest city. The new second largest city is Monterrey, and that has to do with the nearshoring. That's sort of a proof of that. And what I like about the nearshoring there is that those folks that can't make it into the United States, they're deciding, hey, the whole family from Honduras, El Salvador, diferentes lugares, they will stay there with their families and work in those factories that just keep growing and growing and growing. And World Cup is coming. It's going to be Monterrey, Guadalajara, Mexico City.
Oh, yes.
Monterrey keeps growing.
Yeah, know that most of you even know there's going to be a World Cup in the US, Canada, and Mexico. But I forgive you for that because it's not my sport. So where was this other guy, Musk, going to build his new Tesla factory? Monterrey. Did he? That was a big disappointment. When you know the Nuevo León governor, who's from the same party as the Jalisco government, went to see him. He begged. He almost gave him the land for free and all that. And then in this moody thing, this is a big thing. You're a state governor, and when Moss tells you, I'm going to build this huge thing as big as I have in China, in Mexico, you're happy. But that never happened. And we resent that because we're businessmen, and we used to trust the U.S. The U.S. as such, the U.S. government, but also U.S. businessmen, right? If he's coming here, he's taking the picture, we're on the paper, I do expect him to come and invest. And that didn't happen. So that kind of is not very well received in Mexico. Are you deporting him to South Africa? Are you working on that? That could happen. Yes.
That brings up another question. Can you comment on the Trump war on water with Mexico?
You refer to wars all the time. We have many of them. Yes, just briefly, this is the U.S. and Mexico agreeing in, 1942 to share, especially the Rio Grande. What's the Rio Grande called in Mexico?
Rio Bravo.
Very good, Rio Bravo. We won't go into who Bravo was, but that's what we called it on this side, and then you call it the whatever. What's been happening is that we have had indeed a drought, and we haven't been able to make the water payments back to so Texas farmers are not happy, and when Trump heard this, so again, President Trump heard this, our agriculture secretariat also said, so we did release a little bit more water, but the fact is we don't really have it. Part of the blame, as always, is that President López Obrador should have done a little bit that. But to be honest, to be truth to him, he did have a drought in Chihuahua and Coahuila and all those places with that. Another accusation, which is partly true, is that Mexico did build some reservoirs on our side of the border, of course, that eventually these rivers end up in the Rio Grande. And we are keeping some of that water, that's true. But even so, those reservoirs that could be sending water to the U.S. are not full, they're not, so. And part of the problem, and really just to end with this, is there has been urban growth in those states as well. Coahuila, Chihuahua, Sonora, all of these states. So part of the problem is this is no longer just used for irrigation, but also for cities. And irrigation might come and go with the seasons, but people in cities always need the water. So that has also gotten in the way. That makes me remember the question I always ask you, how many Mexican states on this side of the U.S. border? Well, let's start with the easy one. How many border states in the U.S. with Mexico? That's an important question. Which ones? 4. Which? No. I mean U.S. states. U.S. states. California? Arizona? New Mexico? There, you know. What about on the other side? Which Mexican? We had a Mexican state lesson here on Monday, so you have no excuse. We went through all of them. How many Mexican states on this side hit the U.S.? 6. Baja California, Chihuahua, Coahuila, Nuevo León, Tamaulipas. Nuevo León, I like Nuevo León because they have like a 28-mile border with the United States. They said, we have to have a border. So and they created a city. Anyone knows what that border city is in Nuevo León state? Columbus. We created a city that's called Columbus, just so that Nuevo León could have its own international bridge into Texas. So those are the states. They all have different policies and interactions with the U.S., but the border is very much a third country that depends on each of these 10 states to make things work, okay? We need a mic over there. Where's Larry? Yeah, it's coming your way from here.
This may not be important, but I'm curious. You mentioned 7-Eleven in Mexico a while ago. I was surprised in December in El Paso to find that OXXO is now in Texas and I think has plans announced to spread to other states. Do you think this will be allowed to proceed or what?
Well, you've no idea how many Mexican companies are in the US without you knowing, I think, how much investment there is. There's this, I like the example of the cookies, what is it, Mrs. Fields? Mrs. Fields is owned by the Bimbo company. You know, I know Bimbo makes you laugh, but the Bimbo bread company
By Bimbo?
is owned by Mrs. Field is owned by, so the Bimbo bread company bought it. But they didn't move anything. You know, it works, that's fine. So there's a lot of stuff that is running in the US that Mexican companies own, more than you know, I think. I want your opinion on the flavor of Mexican Coca-Cola. Ever thought of that? Should we keep doing it in the US or not?
Some of them down.
I'm sorry, I didn't get you.
Does Trump know all about this that you're talking about? Is he going to try to shut some of them down?
Now he's going to know when they show him our video. So, yes, I don't think he has that many details, but allegedly, as long as the investment is made within the US, he'll be happy, right? So Mrs. Field's still working. It's Mexican money, but as long as it's in the US, I don't think he will mind that much as it minds him to have nearshoring here in Mexico. Let's repeat an exercise we did the other day, because I think that also kind of gives you an idea on the relationship. Those of you who were on here Tuesday, remember we read a column by an esteemed columnist that I really like a lot. Caton, remember that was his last name? We had a very professional reader, I don't see her here today, reading that. So what I thought would be fun would be so when we were here Tuesday talking about President Sheinbaum, I presented you this columnist. I said he's about 90 years old, but he's very good. The reason I chose him, again, you know, as you learned yesterday, there's plenty of columnists and in-depth articles and things to read, but I wanted to have you hear him again, because that article we read on Tuesday was published on October 1, 2024, when President Sheinbaum was inaugurated. This column we're going to read was published on January 20th, 2025. You know what happened then, right? Because now you know how to translate stuff. This is on the Vanguardia newspaper of Saltillo, his hometown. So we're going to move this. So I was telling you that day that Caton he makes a very particular column, because he throws out a few jokes at you before and after the political or economic stuff that he talks about in the middle of the column. This column is called De Política y Cosas Peores, of politics and even worse things. That's why he's titled the column. And just to lighten up the day and not get depressed and all that, I'll have one of you read the first joke of the day. Can I have a good reader there? One upbeat reader to read me this joke for you. Who says I will do that? There you go.
Where's the joke?
I'm hiding it so you don't get the last of it. Here you go.
Young Remigio practiced procrastination. Although that sounds like a solitary vice, I implore my 4 readers not to think ill of the young man. The verb procrastinate simply means to postpone or defer. This young man married Pirulina. As the days passed, she said to him, annoyed and puzzled, "We've been married for 6 months and you haven't made love to me." Remigio replied, "I didn't know you were in a hurry."
That's it. Thank you. That is how he starts his columns, and he just tries to make the difficult issues a little bit lighter. If you want to continue reading, that'll be fine. If someone else wants to help us out, that'll be fine as well.
Okay, where do you want me to start?
Give me a break and I'll tell you. Right here, today.
Today is a dark...
Give me a second. He's talking about the inauguration of the president, not President Trump. We've seen nothing yet. So he's just kind of talking about what's happening. This is a columnist who lives in Saltillo. Saltillo is the capital of what state?
Nuevo León, right?
On the left.
Oh, Coahuila.
West. Coahuila. Yeah, someone said Coahuila. Yeah. Right. He lives in Saltillo. He writes in Saltillo. He talks a lot about Saltillo. But Saltillo is just 2 hours drive from Laredo and San Antonio and all that. So with the first Trump administration, so just so you know, he said, the Trump administration has arrived, I will not visit the United States for 4 years. And he didn't. He hasn't mentioned that yet, but I'm kind of feeling there are more Mexicans than you think that they don't want to visit the U.S. This time. We'll get to back that when we finish this, but I just want you to know that this is something he did. Yes, I'm sorry for the interruption. Bear with me because the ads change and things jump a bit, but I'll try to help you out here. Thank you.
Today is a dark day not only for Mexico, but for the entire world. For the second time, the man who shouldn't have gotten there even the first time arrives at the White House. The world we live in is inexplicable. This is how I explain why there are many things I can't explain. For example, Parmenides' poem, Heidegger's Being and Time, Hawking's 4 Laws of Thermodynamics. I also don't understand how Trump could have been elected again to the presidency of the most powerful country in the world, still, when he is a proven criminal, an immoral man lacking in values, an individual who belongs to the lowest of the human scum, a subject who combines bastard with idiot, a very dangerous combination. I say that the people, a diffuse entity known by that ambiguous name, are overvalued. The hackneyed phrase that the people are never wrong is one of the biggest lies among the many that float around with the appearance of truth. The paradigmatic case of the people choosing Barabbas over Jesus would be enough to debunk such a blatant falsehood. Despite everything, I greatly admire the United States. In that country, I learned to freely practice journalism. I enjoyed the hospitality of ordinary people in cities across the great nation, and without losing sight of its major errors and flaws, I was able to appreciate the prosperity and development built on the work of its inhabitants. Now, however, my admiration shrinks before the shameful spectacle of a majority of voters casting their vote for Trump, a lowly example of the human species that belongs more to the inhuman species, if you'll pardon the deplorable pun. Let us Mexicans on this side and the other prepare from today to suffer the irrational attacks of that ruffian who embodies the worst impulses of the most despicable part of the American people, characterized by a dangerous form of ignorance, that which leads to evil. And I won't say more because talking about Trump gives me cyatoderma, a rare cutaneous phenomenon whereby the skin becomes pasty and flabby. Pasty, I may as well, but can certainly make the flabby out of it. I'd better stop my commentary here.
And then he goes on with some more jokes. Thank you. That was great. I'm going to hire you as a reader. Yes. I get a feeling you agreed with some of those phrases. I wanted to give you this harsh criticism because the part I think we need to save, to rescue from there, is Mexicans' attitude toward the United States as opposed toward a Republican administration. Could you see that? Before he started reading, I was telling you how he decided not to go to the U.S. for 4 years during the Trump administration. This is something my husband also decided and kept his word in the first Trump administration. My very personal opinion, and I would like to hear yours, is that he is not worth my not visiting the people I like and appreciate in the United States. Just like he said, he has had a great time and great things in the U.S. I don't think we should deny ourselves that right because this guy is in the White House. So my personal opinion, I did visit the U.S. under President Trump 1, Nothing happened. This time, after what I'm saying, I'm not sure if I'm even going to be allowed, but, and now it comes at a price. There's a whole bunch of things disencouraging us, asking us not to go. But my message to Mexicans would be, don't let him take control of that. You should be able to visit whoever the president is, right? So maybe I can have your opinion on Mexicans' opinion.
You could do what Canada has done and not go to those red states. Canada is so clever in their embargoes and tariffs that they're focusing on the red states.
I'm really happy you say that, because Eduardo, my husband again, did say, so I'm like, are we not going to the U.S. at all? Am I going to the U.S. on my own? And he said exactly that. Well, maybe there are some states we can go to and not. The bluest they are. If they voted for Trump, I will definitely not even put a foot on an airport. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because his impression has changed since then. Okay, any opinion on that? You're talking to Mexicans now, maybe. Do you get that impression? Because I get the question asked that a Canadian in Puerto Vallarta asked me, are we in peril? Are now Mexicans going to be hating us or even attacking us just for the fact of being American? My answer was, I don't really think that is the case. I think we can distinguish between a federal administration in the US and the American people and the United States. Not everyone, but most Mexicans. Is that your impression? Are you kind of reluctant to show your passport out there in public? Is that something that happens to you, or is that not a concern at all, Americans?
I asked two of my Mexican friends if when they talk among their Mexican friends, if they sense greater hostility toward Americans. I mean, I don't think those people, my friends' friends, would do anything like that. But yes, definitely a more negative attitude toward Americans.
I thought we could talk about Americans invading Mexico City and all that. I don't think we'll have time, but that is an excellent issue, because people just bring out their rage at Donald Trump out there in Colonia Roma, and it makes no sense to attack what is it, that works online, the nomads, the digital, I'm sorry, I couldn't bring up the digital nomads. They have nothing to do with everything that's happening. And I've said again and again, the real relationship between the United States and Mexico happens right here. With me, Mexican, talking to you. This is, we have governors and ambassadors and presidents, but I think the real relationship between Mexico and the United States happens in rooms just like these. We need the conversations.
I have a question. You as a Mexican, or the Mexican people you know, what are your sentiments right now about MAGA people coming to live here? We have a small cluster of MAGA people here, and they keep a pretty low profile for understandable reasons. But how do los Mexicanos feel about MAGAs? Do you think they have a right to come here?
I think this only comes up when someone is wearing the hat or the T-shirt. Other than that, I don't think most Mexicans really make a separation between MAGA people or Republicans or Democrats, or, I think it's not that clear-cut when you're here and we deal with you. I've heard stories of restaurants in Ajijic being Trump MAGA places. So I hear people saying, I don't go to that restaurant because it's full of Republicans, and I don't want to go into there. Because I've been there, they all talk MAGA, and my response would be, I think you should be there so they can have a chance to listen to something different. But as it comes to Mexicans, I'm talking about Americans not going because Republicans are there. Mexicans going into there and having a real definition or identification of MAGA people, I don't think that's actually really happening. We see Americans, and then we throw Canadians into the bunch, and we think all of you are American, so we don't even know sometimes. I usually ask if people are Canadian, and it's funny because I sometimes can kind of figure out if you're American or Canadian or not. But I'm a political analyst, so that's what I do. But the Mexican population in general, I don't think they care that much, and I don't think they can really define someone as a MAGA person or not. Yes, you put your Mexican hat on, and you don't see that. You put your red hat on, and that's a different story. Yes. Yes. Thank you.
I was 2 months in Los Angeles recently, but they say it says Mexicans ain't going nowhere. Mexicans ain't going anywhere, is MAGA. But I wanted to know, in the U.S. we have, I don't know, a third of the people that are pro-MAGA, and they have Fox News. Who in Mexico, what group of people are talking positive of Trump? There has to be that side too.
I think those who stand some profit, especially business people who stand to gain from U.S. economic policy being changed. Those, say, who import tons of natural gas from Texas and distribute it here, they're happy that he's saying, drill, baby, drill, right? They're all for a Trump administration that will just keep on sending the gas. 90% or 85% of the natural gas that Mexico uses comes from Texas, the U.S. We had a whole bunch, we invested a lot in these pipelines, is it? To connect Tamaulipas and Nuevo León to Texas and bring tons and tons of gas into Mexico. So it's very likely that the natural gas you're using in your house now, or LP, LP is? Propane, yes. It's very likely that any of those two that you're using here in Ajijic very likely came from Texas. That's an independence thing that we want to get rid of, and this has to do with Pemex and all that, so Claudia Sheinbaum does want Pemex to replace those imports, but that's going to take a while. Yes, that's the example I can give you. So there are some Mexicans who stand to gain with the change, and they're happy. This is an administration that gives them profit, so that's fine, yeah. Does that make sense? I want to go into the drug war. We're about, not drug war, but cartel, and give you a little video of that if I can.
Y la pregunta que todos nos hacemos, que todos los y las mexicanos nos hacemos, René Delgado, Javier Tello.
Sorry, I got
Y ya está, como siempre, con nosotros.
the wrong video, but here it is. Again, we'll have an analyst being interviewed on Heraldo television. This is El Heraldo de México, the newspaper, which translates to Mexico City Herald. And they also have cable news network. So they create, their newspaper content goes into broadcasting, and this is what we are going to see. Give me a minute to master these.
Y ya está, como siempre, con nosotros.
Okay, you're going to have to be doing a little reading.
Y ya está, como siempre, con nosotros, don Pepe Carreño, editor en jefe de la sección Orbe en El Heraldo de México. Don Pepe, ¿cómo está?
Bien, muchas gracias. Buenas noches.
Buenas noches. Ya comentábamos ahorita que ya le preguntaba yo a qué hora descansa usted con estas semanas que tiene Donald Trump.
No hay manera.
No hay manera.
Los últimos 30 días, no hay manera.
No hay manera, sí, exactamente. ¿Qué podemos hablar ahora de la designación de estos cárteles?
Vamos a ver, esto es, de entrada, hay que decir que es un arma de presión política considerable. No implica necesariamente una intervención militar inmediata, ni mucho menos, o expediciones de otro tipo, pero sí implica que, por lo menos en términos de la legalidad estadounidense, el presidente de ese país está empoderado para ordenar la intervención militar, si la considerase necesaria. Pero, por ley, hay implicaciones de otro tipo. Esto es, todo comercio, toda persona, toda empresa que tenga tratos con los grupos considerados como terroristas, sea acreedora a sanciones en Estados Unidos y obviamente también a las sanciones que Estados Unidos puedan empujar en otros países o internacionalmente. Y teóricamente al menos es un arma considerable porque evidentemente el gran mercado de las organizaciones narcotraficantes, no solo de México, sino del mundo, son los Estados Unidos y es el gran mercado. Entonces, evidentemente ahí hay la posibilidad de una sanción importante. Ahora, la parte más negativa no es tanto la posibilidad de intervención, que es grave per se, sino la posibilidad que esto desaliente inversiones, que esto desaliente a otros, digamos, empresas legítimas de invertir en el país donde hay tales organizaciones terroristas, porque no saben si o no pueden tener certidumbre de que la organización que de alguna manera se transforma en su dialogante pueda estar libre de las influencias de los cárteles o de sus negocios. Entonces estamos hablando de una situación complicada, sobre todo también es de imagen para el país, al margen del valor que tenga o que pueda tener por ejemplo, el gobierno mexicano, pues infortunadamente el megáfono está de aquel lado.
Sí, claro. Y ya de aquel lado se había designado alguna vez cuando pasó lo de las Torres Gemelas, creo, ¿no? Que también se designaron algunos grupos como terroristas y creo que no había pasado.
No, teníamos grupos como Al-Qaeda, como ISIS, que son grupos definidamente terroristas, definidamente con una, digamos, con una orientación social, política, ideológica. En el caso mexicano, los grupos narcotraficantes o el crimen organizado, pues quizá alguno de sus miembros tenga alguna orientación política personal, pero en términos de organizaciones son básicamente organizaciones criminales. Eso es lo que nunca había ocurrido, que una organización criminal fuera considerada un grupo terrorista. Vamos, no lo han hecho ni con la mafia estadounidense, que todavía está por ahí dando lata.
Sí, que todavía existe. Sí, que todavía existe, pero tampoco la destapan así como la otra. Con esta designación, ¿Estados Unidos podría ingerir más en acciones en México? ¿Podría intervenir? ¿Qué
decir, vamos, otra vez, teóricamente esto le da la autoridad al gobierno estadounidense a la autoridad interna, para que el gobierno pueda decir voy a utilizar al ejército, voy a utilizar a tal, en tal tipo de operación y ordenarlo sin injerencia, sin limitación del Congreso estadounidense. Eso no quiere decir que el gobierno mexicano le tenga que dar permiso, ni mucho menos. Es una legislación doméstica estadounidense, no es mexicana, no es internacional. Ahora, la otra cara de la moneda, hay que reconocer, es la potencia mundial, ¿no? el hegemón mundial.
Claro, escuchábamos también hace unos días en unas conferencias que daban algunos investigadores del CISAN de la UNAM decir que Donald Trump pide mucho, pero tampoco da mucho de sí. Y yo creo que lo que estamos platicando también ahorita es que con él una hora se le ocurre una cosa y otra hora dice otra, entonces es estar al día a día, ¿no?
Mire, el problema es que digamos que él persigue una política de saturación. Sí. Muchas iniciativas, muchas propuestas, muchas ideas, no todas son realizables, no todas se llegan a concretar, no todas pueden ser ejecutadas, pero difícilmente pueden ser contrarrestadas, es decir, digamos que sí, domina el mercado de la información, domina la agenda, y es muy difícil contrarrestarlo porque un día, digamos, antier, el gobierno de los Estados Unidos le proponía a Ucrania que hicieran un contrato para que Estados Unidos se hiciera cargo de la mitad de sus yacimientos de tierras raras. Zelensky se negó. Ayer el presidente Trump criticó a Zelensky porque es un dictador, porque no tiene elecciones. Hoy Zelensky se dijo dispuesto a negociar y de repente bajó el tema.
Sí.
Entonces, Trump acostumbra a tratar de ejercer la máxima presión posible, y la máxima presión posible es justamente a través de medidas como esta y de intimidar, de apantallar, si vale la expresión, y de presionar de todas las maneras posibles.
Sí, apantallar, intimidar, como dice, y vaya que sí lo está haciendo con diferentes potencias también del mundo. Don Pepe, gracias como siempre.
Gracias a usted. Bueno.
Gracias. Y ya.
This is the classic example of a seasoned analyst, long there, being interviewed by a teenager. But I think he did pretty good, right? He's like, This boy should be in high school, but I think he does a pretty good job anyway. So there's a bunch of stuff. He is a very well thought of analyst. He's been there for a while, and he knows all of the previous US administration. So did that give you some answers or just confuse you and make a mess of things? I want to ask you because you brought up this ugly topic.
Well, I just want more perspectives, more knowledge, and it added a dimension, and seeing the maturity of the Mexican analyst is feels good.
One thing, if you noticed, one thing that is different, how is the Mexican cartel, drug cartel, different from Hamas in Gaza? They're both now terrorist organizations. Did you see him point that out? How are they different? Did you get that? That's really important because this is the first thing this happens. But how can we tell the difference between Hamas and the Sinaloa cartel?
The cartel is essentially a business organization. It's profit-oriented. A terrorist organization attempts to influence political and social events through terror, through acts of violence.
Very good. You speak like a lawyer, so that's very good. Yes, thank you. That's exactly right. If you notice, he said, this is the first time a criminal organization as such is declared a terrorist organization. This had not happened. And Mr. over there is perfectly clear, these are businessmen. And then he talked about a market. Remember at the start of the interview, the analyst says, the market is there. This is a big market, which is exactly what I told you last Tuesday. This is a demand problem in our view. You know, we have a country that wants the drugs, and we are more than willing to send them to it. So, you know, I also got this question in a luncheon that we had Saturday, I believe. And it's tough because the question this gentleman asked me is, so is the US going to invade? Did you perceive the tint or the vision that we Mexicans have of what's going to happen with this secret agreement that the US is going to invade Mexico? Can you see what our perception of this is? Could you get it there somewhere? Our missile is going to come over Topolobampo or wherever it is that the cartel is. Our missile is going to be flooded. Are the troops coming in? Are the Marines, that's what you say, are the Marines coming or not? What will come? What will happen then? Bingo, drones. And also on Tuesday, I believe, that was when I mentioned, we are already having, this is a hard word for me, reconnaissance flights by drones, and the Navy and the Air Force of the US flying, not completely freely. It's not like we don't know they're there, but we keep our mouth shut and then we contact them, what's going on, because they've been overflying the Pacific coast, especially over Sinaloa and all that, and the Gulf of Cortez as well, the Sea of Cortez. So you're already here, you know. The question, what he's saying, I don't think the US is going to invade Mexico as, when was the last US invasion of Mexico? You must know. Veracruz, what year was that? How long has it been since the Marines came? No, that was the 19th century, 1848. But I'm sorry, the 20th century, remember when you last sent the Marines our way? 1916, right before the revolution ended. You felt threatened, and you sent a couple of Navy ships out of Veracruz. The soldier, I guess it's the Marines, actually did come down. They stayed in Veracruz. They were checking on some Americans, and it wasn't a real invasion. But the boats were there. 1970s. Never again, you know. And we did invade the U.S. with Pancho Villa in the meantime. So that was also a payback type of thing. But anyway, what I'm trying to say, I think what he was trying to tell us is we're not having a full-time invasion of the U.S. That was my response to that gentleman on Saturday. I don't think that's going to happen. What will happen is they will send the drones like who do you think kills these terrorists in Iraq and all that? These are not army tanks. These are drones out there that no one can see. I love those movies. Have you seen them where the control is out there in, what is it, Colorado or somewhere else, and they're moving the drones and their targets out there in Afghanistan or whatever. We think that's going to happen. I'm going to show you a cartoon in that. So you believe me. But I think you're going to like this one. Since you brought up this topic. I'll give this explanation to you. Some people think I should use slides, and I like the idea of slides, but I often don't because I give the microphone and then everything changes. Who's this? President Scheinbaum. She has a husband, remember? So there's him, and this is the National Palace, and she's saying, oh, come on, that's part of that small bell we have. Ringing bell. Can you figure it out? The drone right there? So this is the way of our Mexican cartoonist. His name Calderon. He publishes in, I'm sorry, he publishes in the Reforma newspaper we talked about yesterday. And what he's saying is, you know, we may be denying this. President Sheinbaum will not come out and say, you can send your drones. What she says is, we're talking to them. We know some of them are here. We contacted Northcom, and we're kind of working on that. That's all she can say, because to be honest, the Mexican Army and Air Force and all that, we can't really stop the drones from coming, can we? The difference here is that Donald Trump has now a document. Remember, he talked, this has a lot to do with U.S. legality. Remember when he said that in the interview at the start? He said, this is more of an issue of U.S. legality than Mexican law or Mexican ability or Mexican armament. So he says, if the U.S. wants to send them out, they will do that. They launch them. What President Trump now has is a legal document that authorizes him to do so. Why? Because these are not terrorist organizations, according to all U.S. government agencies. Before that happened, you know, that wasn't happening very much. It was happening all on inside of the border in Texas and Arizona and New Mexico and all that. But now, because he has the legal authority granted by Congress, I guess. I'm not sure if Congress was approved of this, but he just declared them, yes, I guess he declares them based on U.S. law. But now they are terrorist organizations, even though they're just criminal business groups. You know, they're not killing out there. This has to do with you, because I hear a lot of concern about the safety. I'm sure your families in the U.S. are kind of like, what are you doing there? It's a war zone. I'll tell you a story, because when I worked at the U.S. Embassy with Ambassador Tony Wayne, so we were pretty much his employees in a way. So he had every other week, I think, he had what he called brown box lunches. So he called on all of his Mexican servants, you know, his Mexican employees. He said, you know, I want to hear your opinion. So whoever works here and is Mexican, I'll be in the cafeteria and you come down and we can talk issues. You have no idea how much I enjoyed those lunches with the ambassadors. And he would ask us exactly what we're doing here. So I remember President Peña Nieto was just coming into power, but we discussed things that were really important. And I remember one anecdote he gave us is he looks at me and says, Carlos, I am coming from Kabul. You know, this is where I worked. I was in the green zone and tanks everywhere and all that. And my family in California were fine. I am moved to Mexico by the Department of State, and everyone is going like, are you all right? Do you have a security detail? And he's like, I'm just right here in Mexico City, give me a break. So I tell you this story, I really liked it, and that he shared it, because it's these themes and these memes that we have in our head that is terrible. So my question to you is Is it really dangerous? Larry, could we get a microphone? Oh, out there. Do you feel threatened? Do you feel like you go to OXXO and you might get shot at?
I know you may not want to address this now, but it dawned on me, you've got an intelligence base, and I'm confused now, especially thinking about what Trump may or may not have as his interest. But over the years, and I think maybe 25 years ago, there was a movie shown in theaters in the U.S. called Traffic. And there's been this idea all over, not just in this country, but in the one to the north, that if there are drugs being sold, people above know about it and somehow are complicit, i.e. corruption. So what do you know, or what might be going on, or what does Trump or others have to gain, or why would they be fighting their own interests? I'm confused.
I get a feeling you were not here Tuesday, were you? That's all right. This is not me scolding you. This is me saying, we talked about that on Tuesday, and I told you how it is very different when a kilo of cocaine comes from Colombia to Laredo or Nogales, full of blood, and then when it moves from Nogales to Manhattan and Chicago, there's no blood, violence, shootings, or anything involved. My assessment is someone has to be either turning their heads or cooperating with the cartels there. That's right. Thank you. I forgot we're there. But yes, you can go back because I gave you, look for the kilo of cocaine story traversing Latin America, because yeah, we do believe in Mexico that these drugs and these materials get everywhere in the U.S. so freely and easily without shootouts that something must be happening. Yeah.
How high up does it go? Does Trump benefit or not?
That's a good question. I think it's more of a local and state thing than not. But the federal authorities, this is the DEA, is also very much involved. You know, about the president and the cabinet, I'm not sure. Maybe they've heard, I'm not sure. I think they're just, if they've heard, they're probably just allowing it. But yes, this is more DEA state. You know how it is that there are kickbacks and things like that also in the U.S. border, and DEA agents will let whole trucks pass for a little money. And many of them are named Martinez's and Garcia's and all that as well, and they speak perfect Spanish, so they have a way of agreeing with the cartels down here. Let me take you back to, is anyone shooting at you when you go to OXXO or not?
So I actually chuckle when my friends back north say, do you feel safe? And my response is always, I can go to OXXO, I can go to a mosque, a church, a movie theater, a park. I can go anywhere here and not feel like I could die.
That's good to know. So where is the violence then, if not around your neighborhood? Where the violence? Where are people dying? These shootouts and gunfights are happening. Where is that happening? Only the border? It's always cartel related. If you're out here and you get shot, that's very likely because a pickup truck passed and there was a victim there, a target there, and you just happened to walk out of the OXXO. That's the way, yes, cartel to cartel, or within cartels, the groups within also fight one another. This is happening in Guanajuato. Ever been to Guanajuato? Guanajuato is a mess and it's very violent because cartels are trying to get that turf, that territory for them.
I also don't put myself in situations that could be dangerous. I don't go walking at midnight looking for drugs.
This is true. I think I said this Monday or Tuesday. You know, people ask me, can I go to Mexico City? Will I get mugged? Well, if you go to New York, you're careful. You know where you're going. You know what you're doing. Same thing in Mexico City. Just yes, that makes sense. So another difference, you know, remember I lived in Colombia for half a year. So I wanted to point this difference between the violence groups there. Mexico, I was there in 1999, way back, and they were only getting really violent. and they still had to struggle a few more years to get things kind of back in order. But what happened from there to here was that Mexico was Colombianized. What I hear now about the United States is that the United States is getting Mexicanized because some of these products and a little bit of the violence is also coming into the US. But what happened in Colombia is they had a guerrilla force that was trying to topple the government. They were not trying to sell drugs to the United States as a business. They wanted the government down. So when I lived there in Bogota, you could hear a bomb blast, and it was just, I did have one really close that I could hear 4 blocks away in a park. The only person who died was the gardener who was taking care of the yard out there. And this was the way these guerrilla operations worked. As long as there was death and violence, they were happy because that told the government that they were trying to do something. You know, my expectation would have been you're a guerrilla, you want the government down, you bomb the police or the army or something like that. Not just the everyday Colombian who's working out there, but that is happening as well. So here in Mexico, we don't have a guerrilla organization that wants to topple the government. What has happened is that the government has been messing around with dealing with them differently, and that has created the violence. What happened in the 6 years of President López Obrador? Did we openly, the government and the army openly fight the cartels or not? How was that policy called, remember? Abrazos, no balazos. Hugs, not bullets. And well, that got us, it sounded right as an idea. This is exactly what President Pastrana back in Colombia said. What he did, President Pastrana, when I was living there, said, let's just give them half a department, half a state to these terrorist groups. And they can live their community life. They can, of course, what happened is they just got stronger. They bought weapons, and they came back, and violence was even worse. That was a terrible idea as well. So, you know, what I want you to know is the truth is we have lost about 350,000 people since the war started. Not all of them are criminals. Not all of them are, but many of them are just everyday Mexicans. You've heard of the Buscadoras group, have you? Does that ring a bell? Who tells me who they are?
These are the families who are looking for members, relatives who have disappeared. And often because they've been recruited by the cartels.
Yes, you have no idea how many of those mostly women who have lost their children are out there looking for them for mostly bones, and they do find them. Jalisco is a terrible case. We just had that ranch a couple of months ago that was awful, where a bunch of people, and we have buried people everywhere. So is there violence? Yes. Is it awful? Yes. But the reason and the motivation to do that has changed also as government policy changes. So now with the new public security secretary, this has come back. You know, we are fighting the cartels again. How many criminals did Mexico send a couple of days ago? 26. You were here yesterday. Cool. How many did we send, what, about a month ago? Same thing. We extradited how many other criminals? 28. Who said 29? Yes, 28. So we've been sending those out, trying to comply with Trump's demands, yes, but also trying to control the violence and the disorderliness and all that here. I told you this story on Tuesday. There was a time when the Mexican government in the 70s and 80s dealt with these criminal organizations. And the government would say to each cartel, you can go through here, you stay there, but you can go through here. The Juarez cartel, you stay in Chiapas. The Sinaloa cartel, you take Tamaulipas. And then if you get out of those routes and those agreements you have with me, then I'll deploy the army and the soldiers. Otherwise, we know how you have a business to run. This is how things were. But now in 2006, December, when you started fighting them, it was, the phrase we have is hitting the hornet nest. Does that make sense? There must be a phrase like that in English. Like, there you go, stirring up the hornet. This is what President Calderon did. He had his reasons, but it's been a mess since then. Remember that December 2006 is when this really started getting ugly, because those previous agreements were forgotten about. We have 2 minutes to do nothing but thank you. And do we have announcements, Didi? I really want to thank you. You know, all of these issues are hard. I said the other day we turned the fans on because you guys are thinking, and this gets hard, and because you guys are really into it. And I really thank you for holding the microphone and participating, and just for being here. The more we talk to one another and the more we know about our countries, the better things are going to turn out. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.